Good evening, everybody. My name is Anan Najmi. Today I will be presenting the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on financial crimes at depositor institution industry in United States. This is the table of contents. We'll talk about financial crimes and COVID-19 key questions, the fraud triangle, top types of frauds, top fraud risks, top indicators of financial services and fraud, corruption perception index. We'll talk about the fraud in the wake of COVID-19 2020, and then talk about fraud risks from insiders, new fraud alerts, then research methodology and key observations, findings and recommendations, and finally limitations. Some of the key questions coming on our mind during the COVID pandemic. Are financial crimes becoming higher during COVID-19 or not? How COVID-19 pandemic changed consumer behavior, consumer needs, education, and work environments? How COVID-19 is affecting specific businesses and raising the level of its fraud risks? How COVID-19 created huge losses for organizations and countries? How governments can make sure that financial support due to the COVID pandemic can be distributed wisely, fairly, and within the agreed terms and conditions? What are the key recommendations to be taken into consideration in order to reduce financial crimes and fraud risks? We have here very important issues: fraud, financial crimes, and corruption. Plus, we have nowadays COVID pandemic, and we have lockdown for some sectors in some states and the countries as well. Our findings, major findings, we'll talk about it at the end: increase of fraud risk, and there are new difficulties and challenges in preventing and detecting and investigating fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the fraud triangle. In accordance with Dr. Donald Gracie research, fraud triangle model is a tool for assessing the risk of fraud, which could include three factors. These factors are rationalization, opportunity, and pressure. As per BWC, the top types of fraud are customer frauds, cyber crimes, asset misappropriation, and bribery. And the key findings are expected losses due to fraud is 42 billion US dollars in the past 2 years, and 50% of fraud cases are committed by insiders. That means within the organization or inside the organization. The top fraud risk, in accordance with Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, more than 50% of frauds and financial crimes resulted from the lack of internal controls. The top 5 fraud risks during the COVID-19 pandemic are cyber fraud, identity theft, payment fraud, unemployment fraud, and fraud by vendors and sellers. As per the latest research, it's also expected that significant increase in the overall level of financial crimes risks over the next year. FITSI, this is top indicators of financial services and fraud and e-fraud. The top 3 global indicators of financial services fraud in 2020 are card cloning, high risk merchant code, and high spread spending. And the top 3 global indicators of e-fraud are card cloning, accounts takeover, and suspicious emails. And the key findings are 30% increase of credit card not present transactions, 13% in buying sports goods, 98% reduce in transportation. These are 60% increase in networks fraud rate. These are due to COVID. These are the latest, reports issued during the year 2020. As per the corruption perception index for 2020, the highest countries on the 2020 Corruption Perception Index are Denmark, New Zealand, Finland, Singapore, and Switzerland. On the other hand, the lowest countries on the CBI are South Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and Venezuela. This CBI is scored by 180 countries, and its scale from 0 to 100. 100 is very clean, and 0 is highly corrupt. As per the CFE, and there is in benchmarking reports issued during the 2020, 90% of the respondents observed an increase on fraud, and 90% are expecting an increase in the fraud in the next 12 months. This also study is coming that there are these surveys done in May 2020, August and November 2020, and the CFEs, the Certified Fraud Examiners, they are expecting that there will be a significant increase in the overall level of fraud in the next 12 months. And they are expecting the increase in fraud risk in these 3 areas: cyber fraud, payment fraud, and identity theft in the next 12 months as well. Plus, everybody is expecting that there will be a change in order to use fraud programs in order to prevent and detect frauds. There will be significant increase on the investment in the anti-fraud programs. The top 5 frauds during the COVID are cyber fraud, identity theft, payment fraud, unemployment fraud, and fraud by vendors. There will be minor changes in the expected fraud risks during the next 12 months. It's expected to be cyber fraud will be number 1, payment fraud, unemployment fraud, fraud by vendors and sellers, and finally healthcare fraud. This is due to the COVID. Fraud risks from insiders. We should know that expected average of loss from fraud committed by owners is $600,000. There is a significant fraud is coming from employees, managers, and owners and executives, as per the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. The new fraud alerts due to COVID. There is COVID-19 vaccine fraud due to unapproved sales, unapproved channels of distributions, and illegal marketing of COVID-19 vaccines. And the United Nations and Interpol have alerted individuals globally of cyber fraud, online fraud, using a link called COVID-19. And there are many unknown hackers have done many cyber attacks globally against the health hospitals and institutions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our research methodology is our main data is coming from the Department of Treasury in the United States of America. We selected the Depository institution industry as it represents an average of 48% of total filings and of financial crimes in all industries. We selected top 6 states for our study based on the highest total filings of financial crimes cases by states by Depository institution industry. We selected states California, New York, Ohio, Texas, Georgia, and Virginia. We customized total number of filings by suspicious activity. It's based on the category. For 2019 and 2020, we consider that 2020 is the COVID year, and the 2019 it's non-COVID year. The suspicious activity categories are cyber event, fraud, gaming activities, identification, documentation, insurance, money laundering, mortgage fraud, other suspicious activities, securities, futures options, and structuring and other terrorist financing. We took this study based on the category, and we took we customized another numbers of frauds for also 2019 and 20 based on the type of fraud. We selected the top 10 suspicious activity types. These are, you know, the top 10 frauds, and these are coming from the categories. For sure, these are specific fraud types. For example, suspicion concerning the source of funds, some identity theft, credit card fraud, and so on. So these are specific fraud types we also selected in order to use it for our study. We use panel data analysis, as we choose two elements, time series and a cross-check sections. It's a monthly data of the aggregate number of financial crimes cases count for 2 years, 2019 and 20. Year 2020, as we mentioned, it will be the COVID-19 pandemic. We use this panel regression equation: financial crime equal alpha plus B1, financial crime minus 1, B2 plus number of COVID cases plus B3 is the lockdown. This is the dummy variable, where financial crimes is the dependent variable, alpha is the regression constant, and financial crimes is the number of financial crimes filing count. B1 is the first lag of financial crime, minus 1 is to compare with prior month. We use this minus 1. P2 is the COVID number of cases, and B3 is the dummy variable. It will be 1 during the lockdown and 0 during the normal time. The lockdown orders for the top 6 states: California during the 2020, it's 260 days, New York 100 days, Ohio 58 days, Texas 29, Florida 33, Virginia 61 days. This is, you know, we use it for our study. This list will show us, you know, the filing number of cases for the depository institution from the years 2014 to 2020, and we have seen significant increase in number of fraud case filing cases from 2014 to 2020. Depository institutions include banks, thrift saving and loans, and credit unions. The second sheet is filing cases for all sectors, for all industry types, including the depository institution. And this will show that depository institution financial crime cases representing an average of 48%. Therefore, we used the depository institution in our study. This is some of our key empirical results. The number of financial crimes increased by 70% annually. It's also the same percentage for the depository institution. The number of financial crimes increased from 2019 to 2020 by 90%. In depository institution alone, it's also 90%. The depository institution industry percentage represent 48%, as we mentioned, of all industries. All of these statistics is coming from Department of Treasury, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This is also one of the key results we found it from the numbers. If we took, you can say, the key empirical results by category, it's coming that cyber event category increased by 58% in 2020 as compared to 2019. Cyber crimes in California state alone increased by 136% in 2020 during the COVID year. This will show that during COVID, cyber events category, money laundering category, structuring category increased, and the structuring category increased during the COVID-19. On the other hand, there are two categories we have seen decreased in the number of filing cases. These two categories are identification category, documentation category, and terrorist financing. These two, we have seen decrease in filing number of financial crime cases in 2020 as compared to 2019. This results based on the fraud types. Okay, as we mentioned, we are taking two comparison, one by category and one by fraud type, specific type of fraud. We have classified top 10 fraud types, For example, we have seen significant increase in financial crime number 2 and number 4 and number 7, and these are we define these what we mean by financial crime 2, this transaction below CTR, financial crime number 4, transactions out of patent for customer, financial number 7 is suspicious wire transfers, and we have seen also an increase in some of these categories, and we have seen, for example, a reduction in credit card fraud in United States during the year 2020. These are the empirical results. Empirical results, actually I put some examples. I just selected 2 examples by category and by type. For example, we have used the e-views in order to get the coefficient, standard error, statistic, probabilities, and we compare these 2 years. We use this e-views for every type of category. We have selected 10 categories, and we have selected 10 types of frauds, and I give here an example of just two types of 2 categories, and in the next sheet you will find some results about 2 fraud types. Okay, for sure in our detailed study will show the full results for all e-views calculations for all categories we select and for all the top 10 fraud types. This is as an example, and we have selected financial crime number 2 and number 9 as an example for financial crimes by type. We should, for example, I just give an example. In the identification documentation, we have seen negative coefficient, which means in 2020, which means that dependent variables decrease. For example, we have seen a reduction in the number of financial crimes for identification documentation during the year 2020. On the other hand, there was an increase in independent variables, the COVID cases and lockdown. This is very important. And on the other hand, we have seen positive coefficient in some cases. Okay, we have seen 2 different scenarios. We identified all of these things, and we get all of these calculations, and it's done. We have done it in details, and we'll show it in details. But just because we have short period of time, this is just to show that we have some negative coefficient and we have some positive coefficient, and we have 2 different results, because we have seen that some categories increased during the COVID, some reduced, and some they have negative coefficient, and another group they have positive coefficients. We have here finally some key recommendations. Anti-fraud authorities and financial audit institutions must have sufficient financial skilled and professional human resources and independence in order to perform their jobs and duties on time. We have seen, we recommend that there should be an increased investment in anti-fraud programs and technologies, and there should be an increase of financial crimes awareness trainings for staff and promote public government accountability, civil society groups, positive media, and defend democracy. We should encourage corporate governance. We should educate managers and leaders and employees in order to increase their awareness for preventing, detecting, and investigating fraud. Governments should ensure that individuals and organizations have accessible, reliable, easy, and timely and transparent publish information and data. Regular monitor for suspicious emails, develop regular and updated risk profiles, detect financial crimes and frauds are key success factors in order to stop common fraud contributors. And finally, we have regular monitoring for government supports given to people due to COVID-19 pandemic in order to ensure that it can be distributed wisely, fairly, and within the agreed terms and conditions. These are some of the key recommendations. For sure, we'll talk about more during our report, detailed report. These are some limitations during to our work. I would like to finally to thank everybody for listening, and I'm happy to respond to any of your comments. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye bye.